At ease. It's your boy Soul Immortal. Guys, it's time that we finally jump into this book, Resurection by Neville Goddard. Now, like I said, man, it's definitely in my top 5 books. But the thing about this book that stands out is that as soon as I heard about it, as soon as I bought it and started reading it, I couldn't put it down. And I read it straight through. It had that much of an impact on me. It made so much sense to me. You know what I'm saying? Now, the first part of this book is called, the first segment is called Prayer, the Art of Believing. And as soon as I opened this book, as soon as I opened it up and started reading, this is the first thing that came up. It says, prayer is the master key. A key may fit one door of a house, but when it fits all doors, it may well claim to be a master key. Such and no less a key is prayer to all earthly problems. Now, that was the first thing I read when I opened that book. And the first thing that came to mind for me was not only how I was raised, but how religion, how society teaches us to view prayer, right? So prayer, we're told that prayer is pretty much a last resort. We're taught that. We're supposed to do all we can do for ourselves. And when all else fails, let's go to prayer, and then let's hope and let's wish that the good Lord Almighty bestows his blessings upon us. That's not how we're supposed to look at prayer. We're supposed to look at prayer as a master key. We're not supposed to look at it as a roll of the dice or the scratching of a lottery ticket type wishing. We're supposed to know that when we go into this state of prayer, it's going to work. You know what I'm saying? So the first thing we need to talk about, men, is what prayer is and what prayer is not. First paragraph says this. It says, prayer is an art and requires practice. The first requirement is a controlled imagination. Parade and vain repetition are foreign to prayer. Now, the first thing that comes to my mind, guys, is church. Now, like you've heard me say before, my father was a preacher, so I spent many Sundays, many Wednesdays, many weeks in church at a time. And the thing that stands out when it comes to prayer is this. We always had, deacons, maybe 4 to 7 deacons. And when it was time to pray, one of those 4 to 7 men would always get up, go to the front, and give a prayer. Now, each one of those men, as soon as they stood up to come pray, the whole church knew how long the prayer was going to be, how short, how loud, how low it was going to be. And each one of those guys had a specific way they prayed. They used certain catchphrases. And that's what it's saying here, guys. It's saying vain repetitions are foreign to prayer. That's not prayer. Another thing is this, and a lot of you guys might get offended by this, but it's just a custom that we do. I go out to eat, and I see, families over there, blessing their food and praying, and I don't see nothing wrong with that. Even my family, like my mom, she won't touch her food. She won't even take a sip until the food has been blessed. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying nothing is wrong with that, but what I'm saying is that's not prayer. Those are vain repetitions. Those are customs and traditions that we put some kind of supernatural seasoning on, saying that when we do these things, now we're praying. But the thing that's taking place in church, guys, and like I said, my father was a pastor. He prayed, countless amounts of times. You know what I'm saying? And not that he was praying. What he was doing was just giving the people an adrenaline rush. And I'm not saying that's bad, but it shouldn't be considered prayer. So let's figure out what prayer is. Go back to that first sentence. It says prayer is an art and requires practice. The first requirement is a controlled imagination. In other words, it's saying you have to be fully aware of what's going through your mind. A controlled imagination. Now, when the Bible talks about praying without ceasing, it's obvious that it's not talking about what goes on in the church. It's obvious it's not talking about what's going on at the dinner table, because you can't do that and never stop. You can't start praying in a church and never end it. So that should let you know right there that that's not prayer. What prayer is, or when it says praying without ceasing, guys, is talking about going into a certain state, controlled imagination. And let me elaborate on that. I remember several years ago, I was into meditation, I was in all this stuff, and I was living in Shreveport. And I'm not sure if it was like a 3 or 4 day period or just like a week and a half, 2 weeks. I'm not sure how long it was. But for a short amount of time, all I did every day when I got off work was go straight to my couch and meditate till I went to bed. Woke up, meditated, went to work, came back, meditate. And I got in this state. I was eating certain foods. I cut a lot of certain foods out. And about 3 or 4 days, maybe 7 days deep, guys, I'm telling you, something crazy just started happening. Like my brain started doing certain things. My mind I started thinking a certain way, and the whole world just appeared completely different. Everything that I saw as an obstacle, it just went away. It was almost like I was intoxicated. You know, it was almost like I was high. And it was a state that I went in. And the thing is, I never came out of it. Even when I stopped, slowed down with my meditation, slowed down with all that stuff, it was a state that I remembered what it felt like, and I never left it. So when it talks about praying, prayer is controlled imagination, I'm always in a state of prayer. I never stop. Prayer is my life now. Like I mentioned a long time ago, prayer is being. You know what I'm saying? So when it's time for me to eat my food, I don't have to shut down and go to a different state to tell the Almighty that I appreciate it and let this food bless my body. I don't have to go there because I live there. When I'm walking down the street, when I'm at work, when I'm doing what I'm doing, I'm in that state. And that's what it's saying. Prayer is a controlled imagination. You have to go into that state and never leave it. The law of reversibility. Now, I was listening to some Neville Goddard, I want to say about 5 or 6 years ago. And he had, there was a YouTube video called The Game of Life. And in this video, he was talking about Winston Churchill. And he always referred to Churchill. He had high regards for Winston Churchill. And there was a quote from Churchill. It said, "The mood decides the fortunes of people rather than the fortunes deciding the mood." Now, I heard that some years ago, and it kind of made sense to me. I kind of understood what he was saying, but I just didn't have that concrete knowledge of it until years later when I read this book and Neville talked about the law of reversibility. Now when he talks about the law of reversibility, it's plain and simple how Neville Goddard put it. He says, and his examples in this book were, if you can take electricity and produce friction out of that, then in turn, people don't understand that you can take friction and produce electricity. Then he said, if you can take heat and produce mechanical motion, then in turn, you can produce mechanical motion and it'll produce heat. You know what I'm saying? The law of reversibility. And I thought back about what Churchill said. And he said, the mood decides the fortune of people rather than the fortune of people deciding the mood. See, what Churchill was saying is that, that the masses of people think that, if we get a certain amount of money, we'll feel a certain kind of way. And that's true. But what the law of reversibility says is, if we feel a certain way, then we'll produce that thing that we desire. It's the law of reversibility. This is one of the most important things that I grabbed from this book, guys. On page 14, it says, "This law is of the highest importance because it enables you to foresee the inverse transformation once the direct transformation is verified. If you knew how you would feel were you to realize your objective, then inversely you would know what state you could realize were you to awaken yourself in such feeling. In other words, guys, the law of reversibility is a cheat code. It's like a cheat code for life. And when I learned this one thing, brother, my life changed night and day, instantly. I remember, and I'm not going to go through the whole spiel because I've told the story many times. When I was without a job, I know for a fact I had $147 in the bank that morning before I left, and I went to Dallas. And I went to Dallas, and I just went downtown and walked around, and I embraced it. I looked at the smells, the restaurant, I observed the people. I went and looked at the apartment I wanted to live in, and I just absorbed it. I absorbed that feeling, everything about it. And then I went back home, and I lived in that. In other words, that was my prayer. That was who I became. And guys, when I say life changed overnight, it happened so fast. A place that I had no idea how I could afford it. Living in a city that I didn't know how I was going to get there. Within a very, very few weeks, guys, I was there. And this is just how my life has been going ever since. I talk about women that I've met, that I've attracted by this, without even trying to. The woman that I talked about in videos earlier, when I just saw her on Instagram and just went to a state of having a woman like that. And this exact woman was drawn to me, and we had a relationship, and we're still cool. It's how I attract everything, and it's not about material things. You know, I talk about gaining houses and cars, but it's about even when I wanted peace in my life. You know, when life was just hectic, work was hard, and you know everything is just going kind of chaos. I wanted peace in my life. So if I wanted peace, and instead of me trying to just make everything work, I just went to the end result and had peace. And by me feeling that peace, my life just started to change. Guys, I'm telling you, this is life's cheat code. And you know, everybody always talks about, you know, people are a product of their environment. And I believe that 100%. But I believe a person's environment can easily be manipulated. I remember when I lived in Shreveport, and this is during the time when I went that one week or several weeks of just meditating every day and eating a certain way. I lived in an apartment, a very small apartment, and I just wanted more out of life. I just wanted more abundance. I just wanted, you know, more space, and didn't have any way. I didn't see a way to get that way, get to it. And I remember going to buy a picture. I think I went to like Kirkland's or somewhere, and I saw this nice piece of art. And it was a couple $100, man, and it was out of my budget. I didn't need to be spending a couple $100 on a piece of art. But I bought this art, and I hung this art in my living room. And when I meditated, you know, before I meditated, I would just look at this art, man, and what I would see is not, I wouldn't see my apartment around this art. When I was looking at this art, I was in a completely different place. I was in a bigger home. I was in a nicer home. I was in a different environment. In other words, when it says prayer is controlled imagination, that's what I was doing. I was using that as a tool to manipulate my environment. And guys, I'm telling you, man, this stuff, it happens so quick. It happens so quick. But one thing you have to understand is that we have to release a lot of things, guys. One thing that I had to do several years ago is release the objective of time and how things normally work. You know what I'm saying? And reason, all that stuff. All that stuff has to go in the trash. You know, how fast something's supposed to take place, how big, how grand something can be. We try to make things fit. We try to make it work to what we know. But guys, you have to release that. You have to release that. Again, changing your environment. In other words, it goes back to the law of reversibility. If you want a desired environment, instead of doing all these ins and outs trying to force it to work, just go to the end result. In other words, say for example, I want to lose weight, right? But here in my kitchen, I got cookies and donuts and ice cream and all this stuff. Now, instead of just fighting the urge to eat all this stuff, I can completely just change my environment. I can take all the cookies and ho-hos and donuts, ice cream, and throw it away, and bring fruits, vegetables, and clean eating to this environment. And just by nature of me placing myself in this new environment, I'm going to get a certain effect. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to just by default lose weight. So again, changing your environment, guys, is crucial. Law of reversibility is crucial. And it goes back to what I've always said. And I hate saying this because I say it so much. You really have to watch what you're letting inside your mind. Because like I said earlier, prayer is pretty much controlled imagination, right? So when you're watching certain television shows, guys, I know it's entertainment. I know that it seems like, it's just, nothing major. And I watch some of the same shows sometimes. I know listening to music, seems harmless. Trust me, guys, when I'm working out, I'm pumping Future. I'm pumping same thing everybody else is listening to. You know what I'm saying? The friends you hang around. I'm telling you, it seems so harmless, but guys, it's having a total impact on your life. And this is how I know it to be true. Because I've tested this, and you can test this, guys. If you just take a whole week, right? Take a whole week, and say you come home from work and just throw your clothes in a corner on the floor, go in there and eat you some fried chicken, drink you a couple of cold beers or some Henny, pump some 2 Chainz and Future from 5 o'clock when you get off to 9 o'clock at night and go to bed. Do that for a week. Do that for 2 weeks. Your vibration, what you create, what you attract, is going to be a certain way. Now, after you do that, take another 2-week period. Clean your house up. Make sure it's clean. When you come in the house, hang your clothes up. Cut a little jazz, a little contemporary something on. Cut you some fruits and vegetables up. Some clean eating, some spinach, some kale. Drink you some juices. Do that for 2 weeks. And guys, I'm telling you, no bullshit. You are going to be a completely different human being. A completely different human being. And you know what's weird? I knew that. I knew that a while back, but it wasn't until, I'm thinking about a video I did a few weeks ago when I was talking about, what's his name? The doctor that had the water in the rice experiment. That's exactly what that is. That's all that is. I can't think of what it was called, but the video I made where the doctor was putting certain musics and speaking certain words to rice and water, and once he looked under a microscope, it was a different substance. That's exactly what it's doing, guys. When we're watching these movies, listening to this music, it's vibration, it's energy. And with the body being made of so much water, that's what your body is becoming. It sounds like BS, guys, but this is science. This is proven. I guarantee you, if you test yourself, put yourself in a different environment. Make sure your environment is clean. Make sure there's good food to eat. Make sure there's pleasant music, good movies, good books. God, and I'm telling you, you will be a different person. You will clearly see how you can attract things into your life. Your mind is going to work a completely different way. That, guys, I'm telling you, that's one of the most important things. Chapter 2, Dual Nature of Consciousness. Now, it starts off reading like this. It says, a clear concept of dual nature of man's consciousness must be the basis of all true prayer. It says, the infinitely greater part of consciousness lies below the sphere of objective consciousness. The subconscious is the most important part of consciousness. I'm going to read it again. It says the subconscious is the most important part of consciousness. And why is that? You keep reading, it says the subconscious is what a man is. Now, where have we heard that before, man? As a Man Think by James Allen. James Allen went through his whole spiel, and then he said this: we do not attract what we want, but what we are. Those two go hand in hand, guys. And what it does, it boils down to the teachings of the Kundalini, who said, as above, so below. As within, so without. That's really all that's saying. In other words, it doesn't matter what somebody gets on YouTube and says. Somebody can get on Instagram and post, hey, I'm grinding, I'm getting it every day. They can get on Facebook talking about, this, that, and the other, how I'm getting it. It's that part is all a facade. If you want to see what a man is really about, look at the world around that man. As above, so below. As within, so without. A man does not attract what he wants or what he talks about. A man attracts what he is. You know what I'm saying? And you can look at, that's kind of the reason why you don't want to judge a book by its cover. And there's a chapter in As a Man Thinketh where they talked about that. For example, and I'll take two extremes. You can take a Minister Farrakhan of the Nation of Islam, and you can have a group of people saying, you know what, this man is evil, this. And you can take a President Trump, and you have a group of people saying, you know what, this man is this, he's evil, But you have to look at the fruit of their labor. That's why it says don't judge a man. If these men are producing lies that make them happy, James Allen talked about that. He said these men are in tune with something. They might not think like you. You might not even agree with their mindset. But if these guys are manifesting the life they want, and they're leaders, and they're in tune with something. That's why it says, you're never supposed to judge. You always look at what a man produces. And a lot of guys are just talking. You know what I'm saying? But look at the fruit of a man's labor. I'll tell you guys about certain scenarios or certain things that maybe certain wins that I've had in life. But guys, I'll easily tell you when I was down and out, when I was dang near homeless, when I didn't have nothing to eat, and I'll tell you, when I manifested certain things. You know what I mean? Judge a man by the fruits of his labor. Judge a man by the world that's around him. And going back to the subconscious and the conscious. It says that the subconscious is the most important part, but it's not to discredit the conscious. Because what it says is, on page 18, it says, the conscious mind originates premises. The subjective mind unfolds them to their logical ends. So it says that the subconscious is more important because that's the direct relationship with the source of all sources. But the information that's given to the subconscious is the conscious. Our ears, our nose, our mouths, our eyes. Those are the tools we have to gather information, to gather intel, to meditate and put into our subconscious. So guys, yes, it says the subconscious is more important, and it is. But they're both valuable. You can have one without the other. And I don't want this video to run too long, so I'm going to hold up on chapter 3. But just to wrap up, prayer, guys. Prayer is the master key. No longer do we need to look at prayer as a last resort, as a means to hope and wish when we've tried everything else. It needs to be the primary source. You know what I'm saying? If there's a door and there's a key hanging on the outside that goes to that door. Now, it doesn't matter if a black man, a white man, tall man, short man, Asian man, green man, rich man, poor man comes and grabs that key. It doesn't even matter. Whoever grabs that key is going to have access to that door. And that's what prayer is, guys. We need to make sure that we're praying without ceasing, which in other words, we need to be living the life, being who we want to be. You know what I'm saying? Number 2, law of reversibility. Neville put it as, if mechanical energy creates heat, then in return, heat can create manual manual movement or whatever I said. But we need to look at that, guys, simply as going to the end. Like I said, that's a cheat code of us being able to manipulate cause and effect. If you think that having a certain woman in your life, having a certain, place, a home, a car, whatever, person in your life will bring you a certain amount of peace, then just internally have that peace, and in turn you will get that thing that you want to manifest. It's the law of reversibility, guys. That's the way that we can manipulate this whole universe, this whole world. And lastly, dual nature of consciousness. It's imperative that we fully understand what our consciousness level is, and then what our subconscious is. And knowing that through meditation, just through our thoughts alone, we're relaying information from our conscious to our subconscious mind. So that's important, guys. Next, we're going to start with chapter 3, imagination and faith. We'll get on that one here in a couple of days. It's your boy Soul Immortal, and I'm out.